Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Taking Up Space with Jordan. I'm your host, Jordan. In this space, we confront our limiting beliefs, we learn from our failures, and we empower ourselves to follow our own path towards our dreams. And on a quick note, I really want to give a huge thank you for the kind words and support from last week's episode. That was probably one of my most vulnerable episodes to date, and I would like to start doing more of those types of episodes. And one of the main reasons that I get to do those types of episodes is, well, mainly because it reminded me of how powerful it is to have spaces where we can show up fully and be ourselves, even in our most messiest states. And strangely enough, this podcast has become one of the safest spaces that I have. And a large part of that is because of you guys. I first started this podcast because I am a person who has lived a lot of life that didn't align with who I wanted to truly be. I tried being someone for so many different people, and honestly, I failed at it because it was not meant for me. My systems and routines weren't even aligned with who I wanted to be. And that's kind of what I want to talk about today, though, is building the systems, routines, and rhythms and rituals that actually work for you. Not the version of you that you think you should be, but the version of you that actually exists in this moment today. Because think about it. How many of you believe that you are unorganized? That your mornings are chaotic? No matter what you do, it just seems like you are never able to get it right. That used to be me. I used to think that I was just bad at routines, that I was just supposed to live in this chaos and that's just who I was. I could show up at work and be this super organized person, but in my home life, chaos. Couldn't keep the kitchen clean. Seemed like the laundry was never ending. Dog toys were always out everywhere. There was always something. The list goes on and on and on and on. And I always thought, like, if I could just wake up a little bit earlier, meal prep a little bit better, or copy what I saw on Pinterest, that I'd finally get my life together. But nothing stuck. I'd try a new routine, I'd fall off, and then I would spiral into shame because obviously it must be me that's the problem. And it took me years to realize the problem wasn't me. I wasn't this unorganized, chaotic person. I mean, I can be, but that's neither here nor there. The problem was I was trying to build routines that worked against my brain. My brain just did not process information that way. It took me a while to realize that my brain was wired differently. And when your brain has been through trauma or is wired in a way that doesn't match the mainstream idea of what productivity looks like, those copy paste routines, they're just not going to work. And I know that because I've been through it. At 26, I was diagnosed with severe depression and suffering from PTSD. I was in survival mode, constantly activated, overstimulated, and exhausted. My nervous system didn't know how to rest, and so I didn't know how to rest. I'd wake up already anxious. I would doom scroll. I would drink 2 cups of coffee. I would skip breakfast, and then I'd be nauseous, and then I'd be rushing around to get ready. I'd get overwhelmed by the dogs barking, overstimulated by the noise and the clutter and the sheer amount of shit that had to get done. And then I'd come home to even more of it. Partner was still working. Dinner needed to be made. And I would just hit a wall and I'd snap and I'd yell at the dogs. I'd yell at my partner and then I would spiral. And then it was a rinse and repeat on a almost daily basis, especially when it was getting really, really bad for me. And while I wasn't coming from a place of trying to be cruel, I wasn't coming from a place of hostility and anger. I was just completely dysregulated. And when you are dysregulated, a lot of the times the easiest way to feel like you have some sense of control is to either shut down or yell. And I'm not justifying my behavior. I'm not justifying that mental health struggles excuse bad behavior. No, that's not at all what I'm saying, to be so clear. What I am saying, though, is if you are someone who is struggling with mental health and you don't have the support that you need right now, reach out to a therapist, reach out to your friends, and ask for some deeper support. There's no shame in saying, hey, I'm struggling right now. I need help. And this goes further than just keeping your house clean. This goes further than making sure your dogs are walked or your kids get to school on time or whatever. This is asking for someone to help support you build the life that you want, that feels comfortable, that feels safe. And a lot of times we cannot do that without community. And the reason I know this is, again, because I've been through it. I was trying to heal without any foundation. I was trying to keep my healing bubble, my therapy bubble, over here in a separate part of my life. And then the rest of my life was over here. I was trying to keep the trauma, the baggage, the damage that had been done away from what I was thinking was my beautiful, perfect life over here. Not realizing that they both needed to coexist. And it only got worse as I tried to keep this separation between the two more rigid. I would isolate myself after therapy. I would not take care of myself. And if I didn't isolate, then I would like overcompensate by trying to like clean, take the dogs out, do all of the things that were on the to-do list because I didn't want to focus on what had happened in the little therapy bubble. And there were some days that I'd leave therapy feeling raw and shaky because you have those times of therapy that are just a little intense. And I had no aftercare routine. And so on those days, I would choose to numb myself. I would either binge eat, I would overly drink. Again, I'd overcompensate with trying to keep things clean. And I blamed the therapy because surely that was the problem, right? Not me, the therapy. That was the new thing that I had introduced into my life. So that must be the thing that was causing the issues. Obviously, spoiler alert, it wasn't the therapy that was causing the issues. And I talked to my therapist about it, saying, hey, I think I want to quit therapy. I think it's just really introducing a lot of problems into my life. But after talking with my therapist, who was very supportive of whatever journey that I wanted to take, she reminded me to, for the first time, just say, hey, I'm going to take a moment for myself. I'm either going to go lay in bed or I'm just going to go on a walk by myself and with no phone, no music, and I'm just going to take care of me. That day after therapy, I went on a long walk and I didn't listen to anything. I just, walked and took in the world around me. And I realized I really needed to start creating some post aftercare routines around my healing, because I realized that my healing needed to start being the focal point of my life. Because when I started taking care of me, I started feeling better about myself. I started to feel more confident. I started to feel more regulated. I started to feel more calm. And I was pushing myself even further down the path of burnout. And I needed to create more space for myself to breathe. So in today's episode, I wanted to give you the context of where this is coming from. I wanted to talk about what it actually looks like to create routines that are built for your brain, whether you're neurodivergent, healing from trauma, or just exhausted by the rigid expectations that never seem to stick. This episode is for you. We're going to be talking about nervous system regulation and the art of choosing routines that offer care, not control. So if you're interested, let's go ahead and get into it. To start off, I want to be so clear. There isn't just one way to do life right. I know it's hard to take that in because we see people online that seem to just have it together, that they just perfected how to do this thing called life. And I'm here to tell you that that is a lie. I know it's hard to think that what we see on the internet is a lie, but it is for some people. A lot of us are just not meant to be that type of person. And you know the type, the one that wakes up at 5 a.m., they journal, they meditate, they drink a green juice, they go for a run, no screen time until noon, etc. And sure, that might work beautifully for some people, but that doesn't mean it's the way. It's just one way. The idea that there's a universal formula for success or healing or even just daily living, it's not just unrealistic, it's incredibly damaging, especially for those of us whose brains are wired differently, for those of us healing from trauma, navigating mental illness, living in unpredictable bodies, or juggling caretaking, chronic stress, or are in survival mode. Those rigid aesthetic routines can feel like a performance and feel so disconnected from who you are as a person. A constant cycle of trying and failing with the shame loop turned all the way up is not a good way of living. That's not a routine. If you feel shame while you are doing a routine, then it is not a routine that is built for you. And here's the thing, you want to know the worst part of all of this? When we can't keep up, when we can't keep up the routine, this rigid routine that we've created for ourselves based on somebody else online, excuse me, we don't question the system. We don't question that there could be something broken in the routine. We question ourselves. We blame ourselves. We tell ourselves, I'm lazy, I'm unmotivated, I'm undisciplined, I'm a bad person. When the truth is, the routine wasn't built for you. It wasn't built for your energy patterns, your overstimulation triggers, your emotional needs, or your nervous system. And that's why this conversation matters, because you don't need a picture perfect morning routine. You need a rhythm that regulates you. You don't need a productivity hack. You need a lifestyle that helps you feel safe in your own body. A routine should support you, not shame you. And sometimes that routine looks like slow mornings, moving your body intuitively, or giving yourself permission to sit the fuck down and rest. Sometimes it means working in short bursts, not these big long blocks that you see people do, or choosing breakfast over inbox zero. Sometimes the win is brushing your teeth before noon. All of those things are routines that are built to work for you. And that's not failure. That's recalibration. Think about that. It's not failure. It's recalibration. You are still doing all the same things that you wanted to do, but you are doing them in a way that aligns with who you want to be in life, who or how your brain is wired. And we need to stop trying to squeeze our lives into someone else's mold and start building routines that match the way we live, the way we think, and the way we heal. Because here's the truth. There's no gold star for suffering through a routine that makes you feel miserable. At the end of life, there's not going to be somebody waiting for you being like, you suffered this many times. All right, check, check, check. All right, you can go now. There's no reward at the end of suffering. There's none. There's no prize for drinking that nasty ass green juice every morning for the rest of your life. So let's let go of the myth that you're broken just because someone else's structure doesn't work for you. You're not broken. You're not behind. You're just ready for a new kind of routine, one that actually honors who you are. And when we talk about building routines that work for your actual brain, that includes honoring your trauma, because trauma doesn't just leave behind bad memories. It can fundamentally change the way your brain is wired, especially if that trauma happened while your brain was still developing from the ages of in utero till around 25 years old, a little bit older for men. I think like 27, 28 is when the prefrontal cortexes started to develop for men, according to science. Some people, I don't know. But a study from the University of Rochester found that for people diagnosed with PTSD, their emotional overload disrupts the brain's ability to tell the difference between safety, danger, and reward. The brain starts overgeneralizing, labeling everything as a potential threat. So what does that actually look like? Let's say someone with PTSD is overwhelmed with joy at their child's graduation. There's excitement, there's cheering, there's noise, there's celebration. But that emotional intensity, even though it's positive, can push their nervous system into overdrive. Their brain is saying, this is too much, this is danger, and suddenly they're back in fight or flight mode. The body doesn't know the difference between joy and panic. It just knows activation. And it's not just people with PTSD. Anyone who has experienced trauma, especially chronic or developmental trauma, may have experienced changes in their brain structure and function, particularly in the areas that govern stress, emotion, and memory. And I won't go too deep into the scientific jargon, but I highly recommend checking it out. I'll put the article that I mentioned about the PTSD study down below. But here's the basic idea. The amygdala, the fear center of the brain, becomes hyperactive, making us more reactive and constantly on alert. The hippocampus, which helps with memory formation, may become underactive. So it's harder to separate past threats from present reality. And then the neural pathways that deal with the stress and emotion, they can be rewired to reinforce patterns of hypervigilance, emotional shutdown, or dissociation. So what does this mean for routines? Simply put, you might need to do things a little differently. You might need more transition time in the morning. You might struggle with starting tasks or need more rest breaks than other people. And that's not failure. It's a reflection of your brain doing what it had to do to survive. And here's the part that people don't talk about enough. These trauma responses can show up in ways that look neurodivergent. I see a lot of conversations online where people are like, well, I check all of these boxes, so I must be neurodivergent. That may be the case, but things like difficulty focusing, sensory overload, executive dysfunction, emotional dysregulation, they're all common in trauma survivors, even if you've never been formally diagnosed with anything. So if you're wondering, why does it feel like I can't function the way others seem to? You're not alone. You're not broken. You might just be working with a nervous system that's been through a lot. I'll be honest, I don't know if I fall fully under the neurodivergent category. I do have a lot of the overlapping responses though, because neurodivergent traits can exist with or without trauma, but they often do overlap. And I will say, unfortunately, women, especially women of color, are dramatically underdiagnosed and misunderstood in this area. There's not nearly enough research for women and women of color. Many of us grew up learning how to mask, to push through, to hold it together. So our traits were overlooked, they're dismissed as being emotional, dramatic, or just lazy. The most commonly underdiagnosed neurodivergent conditions in women include ADHD, autism, dyslexia, dyscalculia, and Tourette syndrome. Trauma alone, though, isn't a neurodivergent condition. I want to be clear about that. Just because you have experienced capital T trauma, that does not necessarily mean that you are going to fall under the neurodivergent umbrella. But trauma can reshape the brain in similar ways. To be clear, though, having trauma doesn't automatically mean that you're neurodivergent, and being neurodivergent doesn't mean that you've experienced trauma. But the overlap is very real. And so is the need for more compassion, more flexibility, and support. So how do you know when it's time to rewrite the rules for yourself? Well, honestly, there's no right or wrong answer here because you have to be the one to answer it for yourself. If you were curious about this podcast episode, it might be time to start thinking, okay, maybe there's something a little different up here, up in the noggin. There are a few signs though that I would start to look out for. And the first, if you're exhausted all the time. And I'm not talking it was a hard week or even a hard month. I mean, you are that bone deep tired where you look around and there's no motivation to do anything for months on end. You are technically doing everything right, but you're not feeling joy from your life. You're almost just walking through life as if you were on autopilot. The second is guilt. If guilt is becoming a common feeling when you attempt to rest, or guilt for not doing a task, or that one thing that's been on your to-do list for 1,000 years, but you just can't get going, that means that that's our second sign. If you're just feeling guilt all the time, or it's the main emotion that keeps coming up, it may be a sign that something needs to change. Finally, you're craving structure, but you just feel trapped. You know you can balance working out, keeping your home clean, and resting, and all the things, but it feels like there's never enough time to do anything you actually want to do because the calendar is just too strict and too rigid. These feelings can apply whether or not you are neurodivergent or not, whether you have experienced trauma or not. When you are doing all of the right things, but you still feel constantly exhausted or disconnected from your life, then that means it's not the right thing. We have to start trusting ourselves in order to live the lives that we want. If you are not someone that functions at 5 a.m., don't do it. If you know that you can only work in 30-minute bursts, adjust for that. Our brains are all different. Just because you see the aesthetic person doing all these things before 9 a.m. doesn't mean that your life has to match that. Just because something works for me doesn't mean it will work for you, and vice versa. There are always going to be several ways to complete a task. Doesn't mean one of them is more wrong than the other. It might be that one way takes longer. But if that is how your brain processes information, then that is the right way. This is the mindset shift that I had to make in order to start building my routines for myself. I am someone who loves my morning routine, but again, my morning routine might not work for you. I'm not sharing this next part for you to try and copy and paste. If you want to, great, we have free will. But I want you to think about the micro changes that you could make for yourself. I want you to ask yourself, why am I making this change? This is going to be the mindset shift that starts to slowly help change your life for the better. I want to repeat that. Why am I making this change? So once I started learning how trauma was showing up in my everyday life and how my brain processed information, stress, and emotions differently, I had to completely rethink the way I approached my routines, not as a punishment, not as a way to prove I was productive or doing better or healed, but as a way to create safety, structure, and ease into my life. And I'm gonna be real with you, it was very messy at first because I had to unlearn everything that I thought a routine should look like. For years, I thought routines had to be rigid, wake up at 5 a.m., no phone, work out, meditate, be productive by 9. But that just didn't work for me. Every time I tried to follow someone else's blueprint, I ended up burning out and blaming myself. So instead, I started small. I stopped chasing perfection and started asking myself better questions like, what does my nervous system need in the morning to feel safe and to feel grounded? What time of day do I feel most alert and focused? What kind of sensory input calms me down versus overstimulates me? And finally, where in my day to day do I need support, not just disciplined? And here's what that looked like in practice. I stopped expecting early mornings to save my life, at least not in the way you see online. I need slower starts, so I give myself one every morning that I can. I am not someone that can wake up and go work out, not consistently at least. So I still wake up at 5 a.m. I am a person that loves to be up at 5 a.m., but it's not so I can do a bunch of stuff. It's so I can spend that time in my own bubble. I don't think about work. I don't think about the outside world. I think about me. I journal about my dream life. I maybe draft content and podcast episodes if I want, but I need that focus time to listen to the birds, watch the sky wake up, and put my nervous system at ease for the day. And the reason why is because I get overstimulated very quickly. I need my mornings to wake up and process what needs to be done for the day. And that does take a fair amount of time. I don't like to do that at the end of my day anymore because what I found is that it just builds up anxiety. And so when I try to go to bed, I'm thinking about the next day. I'm thinking about all of the things that I have to get done. And that's not healthy for me because then I stay up all night. I'm anxious, stressed about this, that, and the other thing and making sure this all gets done. And it's not a good function for me. So having those slower mornings, building in that time from 5 to I think like 7:30, that's me time. I give my dogs their dental treat and then they go off and do their own thing, usually sleeping, and I do my own thing. Another thing I started doing is building transition time between my tasks. My brain doesn't do well with abrupt switches. I get distracted very quickly. So I started padding things with buffer time, whether that was a walk, a stretch, or just sitting in silence for a little bit. I do use timers a lot to help make sure that I don't lose track of time. And this doesn't mean I get less done though. I just have a day structured a little bit differently. I break up tasks into tiny, doable chunks instead of these big, massive projects. Instead of clean the kitchen, it's become clear the sink. Then later, wipe your counters. When your executive functioning is fried, these types of small wins, they really matter and they become more sustainable. Another thing I do is use visual reminders and sometimes even body doubling, which is working alongside someone, even if it's just virtually, to get through those tasks that felt overwhelming. I am someone that lives with my planner, and recently I made the switch to a digital one to account for life needing to be a lot more flexible. But having those visual reminders of what I need to get done that day, whether that's an appointment, paying a bill, taking out the trash, whatever, I also structure certain tasks to get done when I go to work and am surrounded by coworkers because we are all working in that same field and we're all working in that on that same thing. Another thing is I honor my energy levels. If I know my focus comes in short bursts or that's kind of just where my brain is processing that day, I'll decide to work in 25-minute sprints with breaks instead of expecting myself to sit and grind for hours and hours and hours. I want to be clear, none of these changes happened overnight and they weren't glamorous. I didn't just, start doing this thing and then everything fell into place. No. What I found though is that they did work because they were built for me. And the beautiful thing though is once I stopped trying to force routines to fix me, they started supporting me instead. I wasn't failing at structure. I was finally building structure that didn't fail me consistently. I do want to make one thing clear though. Your routines are going to fail you sometimes. Mine have failed. I am currently recording this at like 6 something in the morning, which is something I never do. But it's because I was too tired yesterday and I really needed to honor my energy levels so that I could show up in this space feeling happy, feeling confident. And I have a whole day today. I have to go to the office. I have to drop the dogs off at daycare. And I also have my best friend's birthday dinner. I don't have time to do this podcast later today like I normally would have. So things needed to adjust. And I mean that, reason I say all this is because we do not live in bubbles. Things happen. You'll get sick. You'll go through a breakup. You'll get overstimulated. And suddenly that grounding morning walk that you take, it feels impossible. Life will shift. Energy is going to dip. And sometimes you're going to fall out of rhythm. And that doesn't mean that you've failed. It just means that your needs are changing. I've had weeks where my beautifully crafted routine completely falls apart, where I stopped cooking, I skipped my journaling, I ignored every calendar reminder I had set, and for a while, I'd think, wow, here we go again, I'm back at zero. But I've learned falling off isn't the same as going backwards. Sometimes the most healing thing that you can do is actually let the routine break without it letting break you. So now that when that happens, I pause and I ask myself, what part of me needs care right now? Am I expecting too much from myself in this moment? What's one small way that I can reconnect with my rhythm without trying to restart everything from scratch? Because your routines aren't meant to be rigid structures that hold you hostage. They're meant to hold you, especially when everything feels shaky. So if you're listening to this and thinking, but I always fall off, you're not alone. It happens. It's allowed. It's honestly encouraged. We need to let the system break because then we know that things need to change, that we need to adjust once again. And we need to begin again gently whenever that you are ready because it's your life. It's your choice. You get to do what you want. And I don't think a lot of us remember that we have free will. We need to start using it. So as you head into the rest of your day, I want to invite you to check in with yourself, of course, gently and without judgment. What part of your current routine feels like it's a performance? Where are you trying to keep up instead of just tune in? Where can you soften areas of your life? Where can you offer yourself more grace? And most importantly, what does your ideal rhythm look like? Not based on aesthetics or algorithms, but based on how you actually feel. And I want you to take a moment and really sit with that. Journal about it, voice note it, bring it up in therapy, whatever works for you. Because the answers are already inside you. You already know what works for you. You just have to make space to hear them out. And if this episode made you feel seen, then you're definitely going to want to be here for next week. I'll be joined by Austin Marie from the Neurospicy Mom Pod, and we're going to be diving deeper into everything we touched on today: neurodivergence, motherhood, self-trust, and what it looks like to thrive outside the box. It's one of my favorite conversations today, and it's full of both heart and real life wisdom, so you're going to want to stay tuned. And if this episode resonated with you, go ahead and send it to a friend who needs permission to just slow the hell down and create a life that actually works for them. And if you haven't already, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss next week's episode. Trust me, I promise it's going to be such a good one. Until then, be kind to your brain, be gentle with your routines, and as always, take up space. Kisses!